The Real Angler Podcast with community Kevin Brennan is brought to you by Daiwa. If you want innovation and quality in your fishing products, Daiwa has what you need. Costa Sunglasses. Discover life's greatest adventures with Costa. Built to look good and be tough. Promar and Ahi USA. Premium fishing products and accessories with concepts developed by passionate anglers. Channel Island Sport Fishing. Offering deep-sea fishing on quality sport fishing charter boats. And more. Mossy Oak. From hot days in the water to sweltering afternoons in the woods, we've got you covered. Outfit your obsession. The Latino Business Expo, Ventura County's largest networking event. Special thanks to Bruce at Kirby Subaru in Ventura. It's the Real Angler Show, live here on Rough Edge FM. And now, here's your host, Kevin Brennan. And this is the Real Angler Podcast with community Kevin Brennan and our special guest today, Bill Varney.
Bill Varney. Hey, man. Good up. What's going on?
Hey, good to see you guys.
You too, man. Thanks for
doing great. How are you guys been?
Thanks, man. I'm doing pretty good. I'm still wearing my ICAST badges around town today. Actually, I finally got to bring it in out of the car, man. I've been going. This July has been crazy and nonstop. So I like at our learning center here. I think I've been here 3 or 4 times in the last 2 weeks to drop off something or pick up paperwork. So today I wanted to bring this in and put it with the other ones. That's really why I'm wearing it. But just wanted to throw that out there. And just to let the viewers know, yesterday we were on the pier doing a kid fishing day, and Scotty had just texted me probably 15 minutes before that. Hey, do we have a podcast guest for tomorrow? I was like, oh yeah, we forgot to book one because again, we've been out. And then your name came up. The guys, for just out of no reason, like, man, that guy Bill Varney, because right now in Wainimi, with the water changing, like the summer current coming in, the water conditions look different. Yeah. So your name came up about being brilliant. So I jumped up and I just called you directly. I'm like, in case you guys want to ever get a hold of Bill for real, we actually have his phone number. So I called you, asked you to be on the podcast, and less than 12 hours later, here, or 24 hours later, here you are, man. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to surf fishing on the coast right now.
Yeah, well, I did some surf fishing where we went. Here's another funny story. So me and Bill Varney go back years, right? I met you through Coastal Conservation Association. I've heard about you. You know, I've been a filmmaker for doing the fishing thing. I've been in the industry since I was a kid, but I've actually been, in the industry for about 15 years, like at the Fred Halls and working my way through. And then I met you more personally during our CCA days. And then, we've done some work together a little bit. And then you told me to come up and get some some books. We were switching books. You're trying to help me get my workbooks into a tackle store. And you had an event in Carpinteria Beach where I'm doing some stuff with the schools. And I read it wrong. I thought it was 7 a.m. or something like that. And you were there and it'd be there like 7 p.m. And I called you and you let me meet you at your campsite to give me those workbooks because I was about 12 hours off then too. So just a little funny stories about like how we met and how we our different interactions. But we were fishing Carpinteria Middle School, and I don't know if I had the best success. We caught a couple perch, so let's just jump right into your history a little bit and what got you into surf fishing and and things like that. I'm going to give you most of the time today to let listeners know more about surf fishing tactics or how they can get hold of you. So this is kind of more like your show today. I might ask you a few questions, but whatever lessons and tips, perhaps, if that's okay with you, or any events that you have coming up, the microphone is yours, Mr. Varney.
Absolutely, that sounds great. And when you came at 7 in the morning instead of 7 in the evening, you were just in time for coffee. Now, if you had to come at 7 in the evening, you would have been just in time for margaritas. So I don't know how you want to look at that. Maybe you like coffee more than margaritas, or vice versa. But it was nice to see you. So just a little background on me. My family came from Connecticut in 1866 to Los Angeles. My great-great-great-grandfather, J.A. Burroughs, fought for the Connecticut Regiment during the Civil War. And then when the war was over, he hopped on his horse and he said, I'm not going back to Connecticut. I'm going to California. And he rode to California. He homesteaded some property in an area which is now known as Exposition Park, or where the USC campus is. We at one time owned about 1/3 of the USC campus, and he pumpkin farmer there, of all things. So that was 1866. And then in 1922, we moved to Hermosa Beach, and really the rest is history after that. My uncle, born in 22, my dad, born in 28, and my grandfather, we're all big surf fishermen, bay fishermen, fishing off the rocks in Palos Verdes. They had a Monterey that they pull up on the beach in Hermosa Beach and fish out of that. That's how, my family had a background with fishing. And then, of course, I grew up at Hermosa Beach and later moved to Palos Verdes. So I was along the ocean the whole time. And my grandmother, she lived right on the beach at 22nd Street in Hermosa. So, as long as I can remember back, I was surf fishing with my dad, sitting on his lap, or on the Redondo Pier, the Munstad Pier back in those days, later to become the Horseshoe Pier. We were fishing off that pier. I sit.
Gotta clear up.
On my dad's lap. I went up quite often and stuff like that. And then when I was about 9, I used to work in this tackle shop, TC's Bait and Tackle in King Harbor. At least I thought I worked there. I really was like, the poor owner, Bill, was a babysitter for me. But he had a bait guy, and he introduced me to the bait guy, and he said, hey, you should go to work for this guy, Fred Oakley. And I went to work for Fred Oakley first. And we collected bait from Santa Barbara to San Diego. We do it all night long. And then in the morning, before the sun would come up, we begin to go over to all the tackle shops from Santa Barbara to San Diego, depending on where we were collecting bait then, and drop off our bait. And Fred at the time was like the 7-time world casting championship. He held about 10 world records from the surf, because believe it or not, this guy, incredible athlete from Redondo Beach, didn't know how to swim. So did a lot of fishing from the pier and the surf. One of the records he held really until about 15 years ago was I don't know how big it was. I remember over 400-pound mako shark he caught from the surf. That just shows you what an incredible angler he was. So that's my background. That's where I learned it. And then of course I've been fishing 3 to 6 days a week over the last, 50 years probably. And all of that trial and error, listening to people, learning from other great surf anglers, all of that has helped me to become a great and a much better surf angler.
I think the reason I said, I think that when maybe it was you, or it might have been Fred, asking the questions about, who you are and what you do and giving you the tips. And I think it was you that gave me the tip about asking some certain questions, right? So I'm going to ask one I think you said to avoid. It was something like, what is your biggest fish? Because the reason I say this from surf, when I teach the kids now in school, is that you're probably going to catch these types of fish, but there's a good chance that you could almost catch anything, right? Anything can come along the shoreline, chasing bait, following the ecosystem and the habitat. So a couple quick one-off questions is, again, and I think you said, people always say, what's the biggest fish? But just for our viewers to understand, maybe, when you are surf fishing, that again, that possibility is there. Like, do you have a biggest fish, where you're like, oh my God moment, I can't believe I caught this species or seen this in the surf? Is there any one or two that you've seen on all your years out there that still have you shock or memory that stands out from fishing the shore?
Oh, absolutely. Commonly in the surf, you're looking at corbina, spotfin croaker, yellowfin croaker, halibut, perch, sea bass, stripers. That's kind of of course, in the perch world also, there's 20 different types of perch. So in California, so those are kind of the obvious and the things that you catch regularly. Shark fishing, we used to do a lot of shark fishing back when I was in high school. That's without question the biggest fish that I ever caught out of the surf, and really the biggest surprise. And so we would collect bait at night. We would leave at 10 o'clock at night, go all night long in the middle of the night catching bait, and then about 4 o'clock in the morning we work our way over to the tackle shops. And so this one summer we're out there catching sand crabs most likely, and The closest tackle shop to where we were as we're getting closer to the sun coming up was Wiley's in Santa Monica, or right on the edge of Malibu there. And so they weren't open yet. Actually, the Wiley family, they live behind the tackle shop in these small cabins. And so we'd wait till we got a little bit closer to opening time and knock on their door to drop off the bait. So in the meantime, we just parked right across the street, and there was a reef there, a rock reef, and it was kind of a low tide. We walked out on this reef these rocks as far as we could. And back in those days, we fished leopard sharks a lot. So we'd use a 14-foot Calcutta, a jig master with 40-pound test on it. And we would fly line with about a 6.0 or an 8.0 hook, about half of a mackerel or maybe a third of a bonita, and just cast it out. We love to fish those like high tide going to low tides, because we could cast that bait out. And even though it was fly lining it, it was certainly heavy enough for that big piece of meat on it to get a good cast out there. And then as the water and the waves would come, the water progressively go out, it would suck our bait out into the water far. And sharks feed very close to shore at night. That's why you don't go down surf fishing at 11 at night and catch perch, because they're all hiding, because all the leopard sharks and pinback sharks and seven gills and maybe even white sharks come in close at night. So I hooked this fish, and I'm fighting this fish for about 45 minutes. And my partner, Fred, who was at least twice my age, is get it in, and what's taking me so long and all this. So I finally fight this thing in, and I get it in, and it's right outside of where this reef is. And I don't know how I'm going to get it now the tide has gone down over the edge of this reef. It was like a foot-high step. Well, all of a sudden, I reel up. I'm trying to get closer to it, walking on the rocks, and a big wave comes and it throws the fish up onto the rocks. Well, it was probably about 6 feet in front of me, and it was about an 8 to 10 foot hammerhead shark.
Wow.
And I absolutely freaked out. It was jumping around on the rocks with its mouth open and coming after me. And Fred yelled at me, "Get out of there, get out of there, get out of there." And so I put it in free spool, and I ran back as far as and quickly as I could. And Fred grabbed my rod, reeled down as quickly as he could, snapped the line off, and the next wave that came, that big hammerhead swam away. And what has been funny over the years is many surfers ask me, what kind of fish are in the surf? Are there any fish there? And I always think to myself, little do you know, is that 10-foot hammerhead swimming around beneath your feet down there.
Wow. That's a great story. Yeah, one time we were doing one of our pier days about 2-3 years ago, and we were on a really, really clear day, man. And we had a 4 foot, about 4 to 6 foot great white, come up. And I thought it was maybe a mako or something, until they came up to the pier. And a funny joke, right? We were fishing with second graders that day, and the kids go, what do they eat? And I yelled, second graders. So they kind of like backed up away from the rail real quick. But when I do my teaching in class, man, and what you're talking about, and that's why, I'm a nerd with this stuff. I'm sure you are too, with the ecosystem and habitat in these nurseries that are in the surf, like how much life really lives there. And when you're fishing and what you might come across, I try not to scare them as much with the shark stories. But again, those creatures could be living there. Most of the time, they're going to kind of avoid us as swimmers and surfers and stuff, But because you have those perch that you talk about, those 20 different types of perch, there's a lot of fish that want to feed on those 20 different types of perch, including small sharks and stuff, because again, they can't take down a big, something bigger and larger. So they eat a lot of those fish along that part of the nursery until they're big enough to go out to the deeper sea and kind of hunt a little bigger species and stuff. So that stuff's, and that's our nerdy side talking, right? About what's
that's right. And the thing, Kevin, is remember, it's like in football, how the defensive coordinator in football says use the sideline as another player, get the player who's the receiver up against the sideline, you'll have a better chance of covering him. Well, that is exactly the same thing in the surf. Fish use the beach as the sideline so they can push in their forage close to shore and then be able to get it because it doesn't have an escape route. And that's why at night we see those sharks come in really close, is because just like a whale or any other big animal in the ocean, it's going to push that bait into shallow water where it has really no escape, and it's going to be able to feed on it.
Kind of cornered up against the sideline there, right? So that way, because I've seen those videos, right, where the whales pulled up on sea lions or you see dolphins, even those freshwater dolphins that, get the bait fish all along. So again, I know exactly kind of what you're saying. And I'm taking notes on this surf fish and stuff. I'm going to be borrowing some of your lingo when I get into class today. And that's kind of why I like to dive back into talking to, even though I'm a host of a show and I do fishing, I know more recreational stuff on the boats, right? And in our recreational fishing, there are so many communities and surf fishing is huge, especially in California. And also, like kayak fishing and divers. So there's all these different types of recreational fishing that are under recreational fishing, not just sport fishing. So to get as much information that I could take from you to spread with other anglers on the pier or students in my classroom is a really good reason why I like to have guests like you on the pod or talk to you at there, because that way I could continue to grow my knowledge, but not only for me, but to also share that, man, with other anglers and kids and stuff. Cause that's neat stuff. It keeps it fascinating, man. And again, is as much as out there, I'm going to, like I say, taking notes and utilizing that, man. So do you prefer when you fish, are you more of do you match the hatch kind of a thing where you're looking for the sand crabs, or do you use a lot of plastics? Like, is there a go-to? Do you have a tackle box that, your 5 or hard baits and, stuff like that? Or what's if we're looking at Bill Varney's box, can you give us a quick, your couple favorites or your go-tos or your standbys that you fish regularly?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, in the surf, there's both lures and live bait. So you've got both of those as choices to fish with. If you look at the California state records, all of the state records for fish that are caught in the surf have all been caught with live bait. So I'm always going to go toward the live bait side because I'm really looking to catch the biggest fish. And when I do that, I'm matching the hatch and doing exactly what you said, Kevin. So let me give you an example of matching the hatch. So in Southern California, we have sand crabs that are different than Northern California. And one thing about sand crabs is sand crabs are found all over the world. I found them in Italy, Fiji, Venezuela, Brazil, Hawaii, East Cape of Mexico, California, Oregon, Washington, etc. They're all over the place. And there's basically 3 varieties of them. There's a cold water variety that often only has a hard shell or sheds its shell for a very short period of time. There's the California sand crab that goes from pretty much Halama Beach or Point Conception down to about Turtle Bay, right on Cedros Island zone in there. And then below that, there's all the tropical sand crabs that you find in anywhere from Venezuela to East Cape of Mexico, all the way down to the tip of South America. I've also found them in Argentina. I've been fishing in all of those, surf fishing in all of those places. So in California, Southern California, sand crabs hibernate during the winter. And when the water turns about 60 degrees, that's when they all come up to the surface. And when the water's about 64, that's when they begin in earnest to lose their shells. So surf fish, all varieties of surffish, they'll feed on those sand crabs. And the thing is that they're attracted to them because not only do they occur in these huge numbers, we're talking billions of them on the surface when the water's around 60 degrees, which is right around May 1st is when we see that. But also when they begin to have their eggs, those eggs have a specific odor. It's actually a very strong odor. If you smell a group of sand crabs and you get used to that odor, you'll actually be able to smell it when you park your car in the parking lot.
I can't wait to go smelling what tide it is. I can't wait to start doing that, brother. I'm telling you right now, you got me smiling like a nerd. I'll let you keep going, but I'm just like, these are the fascinating things where I'm like, oh, this is neat, but keep going, man, keep going.
It's all really interesting stuff. So they all come up to the surface in these great numbers, and then they begin to lose their shells. They get covered with eggs. They give off this strong odor. So it's kind of similar to like fruit you get in the supermarket. So if I was to go in March and get an apple, it's probably not from, well, I know it's not from Washington. It doesn't taste as good as an apple that I get in the fall that is from Washington. That's very tasty. That's its season. So during that season, that's when I eat apples. I don't eat the apples in let's say May or June when maybe strawberries are good. Well, that's the same thing with sand crabs. They're so prolific this time of year, all the way up to about the middle, maybe to the end of August, that's primarily what the surffish are eating. So we like to use those this time of year. But remember, here's another thing to think about. Let's say, for example, that you had a filet mignon every day for 30 days. Okay, the first day it'd be the best steak you've ever eaten. The first week it would have been delicious, but as time goes on, you maybe get a little tired of that filet mignon. And then all of a sudden on the last day of the month, instead of filet mignon for dinner, you get a lobster. Oh my gosh, that lobster is delicious after all those weeks of filet mignon. Well, it's the same thing with surffish. They will gorge on these sand crabs in June, July, and really into the beginning of August, so another week or two. And then they're really kind of over them because they've had so many of them. And that's why in months like August, we love to use mussel, we love to use ghost shrimp and lugworms and bloodworms, because it gives them an option of a different type of food that they're ready to ingest. And then when we get into September and October, and in particular in October, October is when the clams in California spawn. And when they spawn, they come up to the surface, whether they're little neck clams or they're pismo clams. And then the ones that the fish really love to eat are those little tiny bean clams that you see the millions of shells on the beach. They all come to the surface of the sand in the beginning of October to spawn. And they're just like sand crabs. They're right on the surface, and the fish go along there and eat them. So when I'm fishing Corbina, spotfin croaker, yellowfin croaker, all the different types of perch, I'm using live baits. When I'm fishing halibut or sea bass or striper, and all those striper go on both live bait and lures. On those other fish, I'm almost always using lures, and those lures might be grubs. They might be a swim bait. They might be a drop shot setup. They could be a crocodile, a Castmaster, or a battle sort, or a Lucky Craft, or a Rapala type of bait. So that's what we're using in the surf. And I split those two off into two groups, where common surffish, live halibut, white sea bass, possible striper, lures.
That's what's up.
You know, it's interesting, if I may.
Yeah.
Kevin and I both were in pest control. And so we learned a lot about the pests that we were treating. And some of the things are almost exactly what you're saying here. For example, you get to a point where you walk into a home that's got a heavy cockroach infestation. You can smell it. You can smell the actual roaches.
And you can taste it.
Yeah.
I've tasted some cockroach in my day, but go ahead.
And the other thing is that as far as the bait is concerned, when we use bait for like rodents or mice or that kind of thing, we do the same thing. You have to switch it up because eventually they've had too much strawberry jam. Now they want peanut butter, or they want something different. So it's interesting how these things are similar.
I think
absolutely. And the thing about them, and to be successful at surf fishing, or whether it's surf fishing or killing pests, is pay attention. Like, pay attention to what they eat, what time of day they feed, what the weather's like, how, in surf fishing case, how big the swells are, what the tides are. Like, just pay attention. And so, like, how do I pay attention? Way back, I used to have a notebook, and I would make notes and write things down, and it was all well and good. I maybe couldn't cover everything. Few years later, I learned, and especially in the digital age, around 1990, when digital cameras came along, whenever I go surf fishing, I always take a picture of the beach, the sky, the conditions, every fish that I catch, the bait that I had and I used that day. And what's great about that is, like, over time, you accumulate this library, really, of fishing information. And then, so, like, when I come to May, so let's say I'm in April 15th, and I'm like, gosh, May's coming up. I know May's really good Corbina fishing, and the sand crabs are coming up. What did I do in previous Mays? And I can sort through all of my photographs. And so I look at it and go, okay, I'm going to go fishing on Friday, May 5th in the afternoon. And so I look back over 20 or 30 years on May 5th, or right around that period of time, and I can see what the conditions were, what baits I used, what type of fish I caught, where I was fishing, where I was adjacent to structure or on the open beach. All of that will give you information, and pay attention to that. And it's as simple as getting an inexpensive camera and just taking a picture every day every time you go down to the beach.
That is true. Idea, yeah. You know, I used to tell people because I was really good at, again, articulating people's pest issues. And I would tell them that it's very similar to fishing: habitat, resources, bait, right? They'd have this, they would have this luxurious garden in their front yard and wonder why they have ants, right? Well, it's because you created an ecosystem that thrives with all this nutrients. And then these other insects come along to eat these bugs, and they kind of coexist and stuff. So what Scotty's saying is that, but that's just looking at seasons, looking at temperatures, right? We could kind of base, when the ants are going to show up. But it was really easy for me to go from one to explain one about fishing. And then I think that's why I got so good at the teaching part of what we do, is because it's all based on those types of things of what are they eating, right? When do they come out? When do they breed, right? That's a big one. When do you have a bloom? When do you have these different things, that how nature is so neat and the ocean is so powerful, and how these other animals and critters get lined up in time to know when these spawns are going on, right? Like their biological clocks let them know, so the perch know where to be. Like, it's just kind of interesting when they're already waiting offshore, knowing that these cycles in the ocean are gonna come along, which is kind of again, that's my nerdy side again talking about it. But there's so much of that than just throwing the lure out. And then you might even have all the right conditions, right, Bill? And the fish are just locked on, don't want to bite, right? Hello? Is he frozen? Bill, you hear me?
Oh, sorry, you froze there for a second. Yeah, I can hear you, but you froze up for a second.
Yeah, I was just saying,
you feeling better now?
When we talk about about the seasons and how you could kind of get a good understanding for these things, year in and year out, and just knowing that, again, when you have things like blooms and when they start to hatch, and the fish are on a cycle, and how Mother Nature kind of has this pay attention to Mother Nature as well, and watching, like you said, for 20 years, you could kind of pinpoint your seasons of when you're going to catch certain species because of the fish breeding, and the crabs and the blooms, and the harvest, when they lay their eggs, and how all that stuff coordinates to the bite. And that also, again, for the fish, right? We're talking about these sand crabs, right? So then you get the perch, right? And then you get the halibut or the leopard sharks to come in to feed on those things, right? So do you go up to bigger baits if you're trying to catch bigger fish and bypass maybe the perch, and throw something bigger, to thinking maybe there's something bigger chasing those perch that are chasing the crabs?
Right. Well, that's a thing. Certain baits, like certain soft baits, you'll only get perch on those, because even though there's bigger fish on the outside, including bigger perch, all the little perch are just trying to survive. They'll eat anything that they see, and that thing hits the water, they're there in numbers before any bigger fish can get around them. So you do move on to bigger baits, different baits, like for perch, for example. The state record, which is held by Fred Oakley, was caught on a sidewinder crab, those line short crabs you see running up the pilings on the pier or on rocks and stuff. And the reason that those are so effective is that because they're a harder, larger bait. And so the smaller perch cannot actually eat those or eat them as effectively. And so they stay floating in the zone long enough for the big perch who are following the small ones, are not quite so quick, and certainly won't just eat anything, because big surf fish didn't get big by being stupid. They got big by being smart. They hang back, and when they can't eat that bait, they go right after that bait. And that's, you sidewinder crabs, you have a tendency to catch really big perch. And of course, that would be true with halibut. Not only halibut looking for most likely a fin bait or a squid type of presentation. They will eat a sand crab if they're hard up, but not as often as they would on a larger bait that would be similar to something that they would normally be eating.
Do you have a go-to? Do you primarily fish perch? Is that your go-to, or do sometimes you be like, I'm just going to focus on halibut today? Or do you ever do that, or is it kind of just you fish? I know you said like the crab in your live.
I fish all the different. Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, I fish all the different surf fish. So, we fish halibut at a different tide than we fish all the other surf fish. So corbina, spotfin croaker, yellowfin croaker, perch, those are all around a high tide period. So it's either low coming up to high, which is really good for corbina, or it's high going to low, which is really good for perch fishing. And then when we have neap tides or what we would consider slack tide periods, That's when we're fishing for halibut. Halibut are very lazy by nature. If you're in the middle of a tide change, there's no way they're coming off the bottom out of the sand to go after your bait. So they're going to bite primarily about 30 minutes before low tide to 30 minutes after low tide, 30 minutes before high tide to 30 minutes after high tide, when there's very little water movement. That's their favorite time to feed. And then all the other surf fish are only going to feed when there's a strong current. I have to let my dog out. I'll be right back.
When the dog's got to go, the dog's got to go.
I put in the notes here any questions. I should do that next time and be like, anybody have questions?
My dog thinks it's a movie star, I think.
Well, speaking about being movie stars, man,
video.
I know you have another podcast after this to be a guest on. So let's talk about you a little bit. There's such a lot great information. I know that you've donated some books to you, and we've given them away in some of our surf fishing fundraisers, and the kids that actually win, like our Hoop There It Is. So we strategically gave away your books to people, and then we still have some, but we also thumbed through it and stuff. Some of our guys in the Wainimi Beach Pescadorians, they love surf fishing, and 805 SoCal 805 Fishing Crew does a lot of surf fishing. Let's talk about the books that you have, man, and then any other, if you have anything coming up in SoCal that people can register for, or any of your clinics, man, so that way we could get some coverage. And that way, if you didn't, I know you have a lot of wealth of knowledge in those books. So where can they get your editions? What edition are you on? And then also where they could find you and what kind of events you have coming in our backyard.
Wow, that's a lot of questions. Well, let me cover, Kevin, one thing real quick that we didn't cover that I think is really important for you guys in your area and all that. So surf fishing is interesting. Corbina, spotfin, a lot of good surf fishing, let's say, it all kind of originates down in San Diego and moves its way north. And the reason that it does that is because in those wintertime, all of our swells and our water temperature comes from the north, which makes the water cold. And then in the summertime, we have hurricane swells that come from the south of us and push warm water north. So we have two areas that hurricanes come from. The first is in the South Pacific, really right off of Antarctica, near New Zealand and Australia. That's about 5,500 miles from here. They're called cyclones down there. They have currently been throwing south swells up here, gosh, for about 2.5 months or so. And because it's such a long distance, they're not really big swells. They're maybe about waist high. And each time those swells come along, it pushes water to the north. And that's why the Santa Barbara, the ocean in Santa Barbara Harbor is about 60 degrees right now. And down in San Diego, it's about 72 degrees because that warm water has been pushed into San Diego and Orange County. Now, over the next couple of weeks, that's going to change dramatically because the second place that produces hurricanes, which are called hurricanes, is right off of Veracruz, Mexico. If you look on a map of Central America, Panama is basically the skinniest strip of land there. And what happens is these tropical storms come off the Gulf, go across the land there, and then right off into the Pacific Ocean and become hurricanes. We have 2 tropical storms down there now that have a little bit greater than a 40% chance of turning into hurricanes in the next 2 weeks. But once we get into August, we're going to see really the spawning of quite a few hurricanes from down there. And because they're so much closer to California, they're only maybe 1,000 miles or 800 miles away, and sometimes even closer, they're going to send bigger swells in our direction from the south and push more warm water into Ventura, Santa Barbara County, really all the way up, as I said, up to Jalama and Point Conception, and warm up the water. That will happen in August, September, and October. And probably, as you know, Kevin, without question, the best surf fishing up in Ventura, Santa Barbara County would be August, September, October. Those are fantastic months. So that's what we're going to be seeing come up. So don't feel bad that maybe it's not wide open up there yet. In a couple of weeks, it's really going to heat up. You're going to start seeing those Corbina roll into Ventura. And then by the time we get halfway through August, they're going to be thick up at Carpinteria. Carpinteria's got some of the biggest Corbina on the California coast. So that's coming. Just get ready for it. And then if anybody wants to pick up my book, you can find it on my surf fishing site where I have all my tackle, surffishtackle.com. You can learn all about surf fishing. Have articles, information about rigging, surf fish, how to find fish at the beach, where to go. That can all be found on fishthesurf.com, FISHTHESURF.com. And you can pick up my book not only in the store, but you'll also find it on eBay and Kindle, and then also on Amazon. So you really can't miss it. Just look for Surf Fishing, the Light Line Revolution, and that'll give you everything you need to know. It's our 3rd edition. It's about 230 pages long. It covers every single thing I know about surf fishing right there.
Yeah, I know we took it up to Carpinteria School when I was up there teaching the kids, but we were kind of limited on the time that we had, so we didn't do a lot of studying in the classroom because we had to walk down to the beach and surf fish and then walk back and trying to gauge the time. But we did open up when we had some rain, and the first couple of times so I could show kids habitat, ecosystem, and we got to tie knots. But I know we just scratched the surface, man, of what you have in that book, but it was a good lead in to showcase surf fishing to the students. But we try to spend a little bit more time on the water, so I'll probably study up a little bit more. Jamie Dimon helped us get into the school system up there, and that's kind of a cool part about our California-based fishermen. I mean, you talked about this yesterday, but when I called you, that we support each other, and utilizing what you've taught us and what your book, man, and I'm taking it into schools, showcasing that with new first-time anglers. We gave away some badges this last semester for some students up there, and hopefully we'll get back again. But we used your book in the school just to let you know that we are using that to pass on to the new generation too, man, and use what we can out of there and teach about different things to look for in the water and stuff. Again, just scratching the surface of the first chapter or two, but again, there is a wealth of knowledge in there, and you're a wealth of knowledge, man. And I really appreciate, I know we're again kind of up against it, but love to have you back and talk more about it. Is there any events? Didn't you say you're coming out here to Oxnard or the 805 to do one coming up soon, you said?
Yeah, I have an event coming up this weekend. It's been sold out for months. It's Bolsa Chica in Huntington Beach. And I think it sold out in about 4 hours. It filled up. And my next event, I don't have it yet. I was going to have one in Morro Bay. It kind of fell through. So I'm really working on getting down to Ventura, and I will definitely let you guys know once I have that set up.
Because I like you to take a look here at our learning center, man, and check it out. Because again, I just want to always show my respect, man, of me coming up into this game of guys that are doing it, and just to showcase what we're working on around here for our industry. We don't do stuff with CCA, and the importance, again, even though we do this for a living or for sport and for food and for fun, but we're always trying to continue to push forward of getting those new anglers and first-time anglers. And that's what's great about your book and your clinics, is to break down some of those, what I put yesterday, there's a, what did I say? Intimidation factor, right, of fishing that might prevent somebody from getting started. So when you have a class or a course or something easy where you could come down to the surf versus getting on maybe a long range boat or a sport fishing boat or something, and answering those questions to get people to go purchase a little combo and start fishing on their own, man. And we're both advocates for that in our state of California and for our industry, man. So whenever you're in town, man, stop by and check out what we got going on at our facility.
I will. That sounds great.
And it won't be at 7 a.m. I won't come banging on your tent asking for looking a cup of coffee and a margarita, man. I'll make sure we dial it in correctly. But thanks, Bill. It's about a few minutes before your next one again. And thank you so much, man, for last minute coming on. And we'll like to catch up in a few more months. And I did write down.
He's got all kinds of
notes that you gave us about fishing and what we're doing for us to get out there and get a part of it, man. So thanks for taking time out of your day to join us today. Anything else you want to add, man, before we go?
No, it's a pleasure being with you guys. I look really forward to coming back and helping people learn more about surf fishing. And as I said, check out fishthesurf.com. It's my educational site. There's so much information there. Makes it really easy for you to learn surf fishing. And my phone number and my email's on there. Feel free to send me a note or give me a phone call if you have questions.
Absolutely. And then Scotty here is our engineer, so he'll have this up and I'll share it with you. And then we'll send it out in our newsletter. And again, and we'll talk soon about some of our new books. The new book I got, just so you know, I didn't see it, was called Coastal Critters. And we talk about some of the fish that migrate from the freshwater to the saltwater, striper being one of them, and catching those in the surf. So I like to share our new book with you too. It's more about California, but we'll do that at another time. Again, thank you so much for the support, man. And we'll catch up with you again soon, man.
All right. It's great seeing you guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Bill.
All right, Bill. Bye.
Bye.
The Real Angler Podcast with community Kevin Brennan is brought to you by Daiwa. If you want innovation and quality in your fishing products, Daiwa has what you need. Costa Sunglasses. Discover life's greatest adventures with Costa. Built to look good and be tough. Promar and Ahi USA. Premium fishing products and accessories with concepts developed by passionate anglers. Channel Island Sport Fishing. Offering deep sea fishing on quality sport fishing charter boats. And more. Mossy Oak. From hot days in the water to sweltering afternoons in the woods, we've got you covered. Outfit your obsession. The Latino Business Expo, Ventura County's largest networking event. Special thanks to Bruce at Kirby Subaru in Ventura. This has been a Rough Edge Studios production.